Sur Militam Yena Tasmai Gurave Namaha. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pristaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharane Nirvishesha Shrivadi Paskatyade Sakarana. Devotee care has many meanings. One meaning, of course, is, it can mean so many things that sometimes we wouldn't have enough energy to apply all the meanings, or any of the meanings sometimes. But I think in this particular initiative, the meaning has more to do with the spiritual and practical care of the devotees. That our society, because of its expansiveness and for other reasons, has created many initiated devotees and other devotees who have come, perhaps lived in the temple for some time, and then after some time got married, in the midst of getting married, established businesses or had employment, had families or have families, and in the midst of all the practical activities in order to raise a family, in order to perform the necessary activities to gain money, run businesses, have employment, sometimes their devotional activity, their devotional sadhana has slackened, their association with the devotees has diminished, their ability to make progress in spiritual life has become at least temporarily impeded. So seeing that, realizing, as Prabhupada once said, that you can get more and more milk, but if you keep on adding water to the milk, then after a while, you don't have milk anymore, you have more water than you have milk. So rather than just continuously expand our society by getting more and more and more members, but the members themselves are not cared for in such a way that their progress in spiritual life is not guarded or at least assisted. Therefore, our basic aim of our society, which is to create two things. One of them is to give people the opportunity to chant Hare Krishna, and the other is to create an atmosphere by which the chanting of Hare Krishna becomes most effective. Therefore, we also have to look and see that those devotees who have taken up Krishna consciousness and for some reason or another have gone outside the orbit of close association with devotees and whose personal sadhana and other devotional activities has diminished, to give them some assistance. Devotee care, of course, could also mean to make sure that everyone is properly fed and cared for, and that that in the future they'll have all the material opportunities so that they can perform their devotional service peacefully without unnecessarily anxiety over their material circumstances and situation. But I think the people who are living on the outside, the question is not so much their material circumstances, whether they're adequate or not, or even their future, because everyone in Europe nowadays is completely in anxiety about what the prospects of economic development are. But that's just a general problem for Europe nowadays, living in the economic system which is based upon an completely artificial economic system. I mean, for that, then some attempt, like we have His Holiness Sivarama's project in Hungary, some attempt for a little bit closer existence to the land where we're getting our food, because if we have food, then no matter what the price of an iPad is, it won't disturb us so much unless they make iPads which are edible, which may be some time in the future, but right now whatever the price of stocks are or whatever is not going to concern someone who knows that tomorrow I can milk a cow and I'll have some, I can make chapatis from at least corn that I grow on my farm. But that's not the issue here so much, but the issue is how much effort to actually put into cultivating people's devotional creeper, and at the same time how to create an atmosphere by which the devotees who are living on the outside of the temple, or even inside of the temple perhaps, how much they're actually inspired to take assistance from others in some way or another. We have a culture where theoretically when you take initiation, that you take shelter of your initiating guru and you're inspired by him, but even the guru is far away or doesn't visit very often, then theoretically then we're inspired by his instructions, or even deeper than that, the instructions of our previous acharyas, etc. But we find that that's usually not sufficient, in the sense that if one is overwhelmed by material circumstances and forgets, then one forgets more or less even his initiating guru's instructions or example. He forgets his previous association with the devotees. There's so much forgetfulness on the outside, just like, for instance, Daksha. There's not the Dakshas initiated within our society, but Daksha Maharaj in the Srimad Bhagavatam. So Daksha was a great personality. He was so absorbed in spiritual consciousness that when he entered into the arena of sacrifice that was being held by the demigods, then all the great personalities in the universe, with the exception of Lord Shiva, Lord Vishnu didn't happen to come to the sacrifice because he knew there was going to be some disturbance, and Lord Brahma also didn't come. But Lord Shiva did not stand up, but all the great Prajapatis and all the great demigods stood up. So Daksha was a great person in terms of his austerity and knowledge, etc. And of course, those who know that sacrifice, there were a few problems for Daksha at the sacrifice. Later on, he had to take birth again, and he took birth in another millennium, and he was also a great personality, but he wanted to become empowered. Therefore, he underwent great sacrifices, great austerities, so much so that Lord Vishnu personally came, along with many of his associates, riding on the back of Garuda, and Daksha was so ecstatic when he experienced the presence of Lord Vishnu personally coming to meet him, that he literally had to sit down on the ground due to his ecstasy. But then, when Lord Vishnu said, "What can I do for you?" he said, "Well, I want unlimited sex life." So considering that a person was so ecstatic in the association of Lord Vishnu, and then he asked for something which is more or less mundane. So forgetfulness can be instantaneously, or even simultaneously, with our material existence. It's not very hard to understand that someone can experience even a higher taste in Krishna consciousness, and then by the covering influence of Maya, forget it, like Bharat Maharaj. Bharat Maharaj has said that he was on the preliminary stages of bhava, which means that on the stage of asakti, that the mind is so fixed in Krishna consciousness that even for a moment it deviates, then it immediately withdraws back spontaneously into thinking about Krishna. And beyond that, even much more intense than that, is bhava, where one's natural feelings towards Krishna are being awakened, spiritual feelings. Bharat Maharaj was on the preliminary stages of bhava, and yet somehow or another he befriended a deer cub and became so absorbed in the deer cub that his sadhana slackened, and it took a very unpleasant experience where he took birth as a deer in order to inspire him again to take seriously the process of sadhana. So we can expect sometimes that devotees under the present circumstances, the society in general is not very conducive towards devotional service. I don't think there's even one billboard outside which is advertising chant Hare Krishna, or is subtly inspiring people to follow four of the principles, or even one principle, or any. But the whole society is geared up to make sure that no one becomes inspired for devotional activities. And the general conversations, the general mentality, the general understanding, the general inspiration, enthusiasm is for everything which is practically outside of devotional activities. Therefore, devotees who go outside and start this particular lifestyle, which is necessary, because in ISKCON we don't have the economic system to provide for grihastas within our society, and therefore there is so much other association given. Realizing that, there are many serious devotees and sincere devotees who are inspired to go out and render some assistance to those on the outside, to try to inspire them to perform their sadhana and to practice devotional activities. And even beyond that, if it's possible, just like there's one devotee, Vaishasika Prabhu, for instance, in America, and goes around to different places in the world, who's inspired many congregational devotees, at least once a month, for a couple of days in the month, to go out and distribute Prabhupada's books by setting up tables and other means, and it's proved to be quite successful. Book tables. So to inspire the devotees to practice sadhana more strictly, to preach to each other and to the non-devotees, to become more engaged in devotional activities. So that endeavor is being is being organized in order to do that. And then, of course, the success of that depends upon also the receptivity of the devotees that they're approaching, to see that it's actually a great opportunity to participate, that ISKCON has recognized that it's not just a temple-based program, and of course it's not just once a week on the Sunday feast either, that Prabhupada writes in the Bhagavad Gita that Putra Dara Grihadishu, Putra, children, Dara, the wife, Grihadishu, and the home and rest. So it's detachment from family, wife, home, and the rest. And Prabhupada writes that detachment doesn't mean that one gives up affection for the family members. It means that one should sit down with the family members in the morning and the evening and chant Hare Krishna, hear about Krishna, have deities, offer some service to the deities, and that way make the home Krishna conscious. That in the material world we cannot expect absolute or perfect happiness, nor is there going to be complete distress either. But if one is trying to make the home Krishna conscious, that's as close to perfection as we can expect to get in this material world. So, as I understand, that this endeavor is to assist the devotees on the outside, and hopefully the devotees who are living outside, I mean physically outside, who have other obligations other than simply worshiping the deity all day or going on in Harinam or distributing books on the street, who have other obligations, to try and assist them. And if the devotees can appreciate that and also offer their help and receptivity for the mission that's being, or for the initiative that's being undertook, that's the only way it's going to be receptive or successful. sometimes there's some tendency to wonder or to question who's actually capable of inspiring us, who's actually qualified to inspire us, what their qualifications should be. The most advanced devotee, every time they hear the holy name, they're in ecstasy, because they understand that there's no difference between Krishna's name and Krishna. The second-class devotee also realize, when they see a Vaishnava, they recognize that that's actually Krishna. They understand that Vaishnava, or any devotee, that they're being utilized to different degrees by Krishna as an instrument. So our association with the devotees is not association with ordinary persons, it's association with persons who are being utilized, souls, who are being utilized to different degrees as instruments for Krishna. Therefore, they're non-different from Krishna to the degree that they're actually surrendered to Krishna. But at least they have the quality of being surrendered to some degree, just like you may have a mango. It may be a green mango, or it may be a ripe mango. In any case, it's a mango. You can't say because it's a green mango, it's no longer a mango, it's a banana. Of course, some people may say like that, but we don't agree with them. Similarly, one who's acting, chanting Hare Krishna, following the principles, who is following the previous authorities coming from Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, then even if they're not on the highest level of spiritual realization, according to our estimation, still because they're acting on behalf of the previous acharyas, they're as good as Krishna. And if we are able to take advantage of their association, then we'll make progress in spiritual life and ultimately revive our relation with Krishna. One may be relatively successful in material life, one may be relatively unsuccessful in material life. That may be a personal experience. But the success in life will not be whether my life was relatively peaceful and happy, although that may be sometimes conducive to Krishna consciousness, or sometimes it's not conducive to Krishna consciousness. But in any case, my ultimate success in life will be how much I was able to utilize my present circumstances and engage them in Krishna's service. So there's an opportunity. The devotees care enough, the leaders care enough, the devotees who are participating in this initiative care enough, not only for their personal circumstances, but also to help others in their spiritual path, in their spiritual progress. So I think we have to appreciate them and try and support them, try and, if possible, help them, participate in their initiative. And this way, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu will be very pleased, Prabhupada will be pleased, our devotees in our society, our leadership will be pleased, and ultimately we'll make progress towards something very meaningful, something permanent, eternal, our relation with Krishna, and then we'll be able to understand more and more of what ultimate real success in life is. We may be poverty-stricken, we may be multi-billionaires. Pundarik, Vidyanidhi was very rich, Kuladekar Sridhar was very poor, but they were equally great devotees of Krishna, and therefore they were equally successful in that realm, and therefore they're equally glorified by our Vaishnavacharyas. So that we have to see how to make everyone successful, how to care for everyone in the real sense. Of course, the other things shouldn't be neglected either. That takes some intelligence in terms of just physically helping, caring for people. Just as short, because I'm the Minister for Health and Welfare also. A lot of time devotees, they think that, well, from that point of view, I think there's a certain amount of devotee care is necessary to educate the devotees so they don't get too much care from a system which is actually maybe superficially caring, but is actually quite dangerous to get involved in sometimes. That is the methodology of taking too much shelter in the current system of medicine, for instance, which relies upon highly toxic medicine and drugs, and is quite expensive to begin with, but is quite invasive in their treatment of disease, and etc., etc. So in that sense, sometimes our society is not able to provide financially for the care of the devotees in our society in terms of their medical treatment, etc. But I think even if the outside society is able to provide very nicely for that, at the same time the devotees should educate themselves in what the effects are of over-treatment by excessively utilizing allopathic drugs, allopathic procedures, surgery, etc., because they might get themselves into more trouble than is actually effective treatment. So I'm just saying that because sometimes we wonder, they ask me, what is the health and welfare ministry doing to help our devotees? I mean, I did give some donations to some devotees that I received in order for them to have certain types of treatment at times. But I think our most effective thing right now is to educate the devotees in what proper treatment is, who could properly treat us as devotees, and what the proper, or to the best of my ability or other people's authority devotees within our society, so that we actually can live life in such a way as that we don't cause ourselves problems by overeating or over-gratifying the senses or lacking regulation or putting ourselves in positions of too much anxiety, over-endeavoring, atyahara, priyasascha, which lead to all kinds of problems, spiritually and materially. Proper diet, proper regulation, proper cleanliness, that these things are much more effective than, popping pills and hoping for the miracle cure. And then, when that doesn't work, then taking very extreme cures, spending a lot of money running here and there, and then hoping that's going to work. It may not work. Usually doesn't work. So in any case, there are devotees who care on the physical level. I don't recommend, and there are devotees who care on the spiritual level too. I think the primarily consideration of this initiative is the spiritual level, and according to our authorities in Ayurveda, the material problems usually originate often from the spiritual platform. If we're not happy in Krishna consciousness, then we'll seek our happiness in other places, and other places usually will not make us happy either, and that will cause psychological problems. It'll also cause emotional problems, and will cause us to overly gratify the senses, or to gratify them in ways which are detrimental, which will lead to ultimately to unnecessary health problems. So, according to Charak Samhita, which is the standard book of Ayurveda, the ultimate treatment for any disease is the medicine and the diet. And the ultimate medicine is chanting the holy names of God, according to Charak Samhita. And the best medicine is to take food offered to God with love, prasad. So that's recommended by our topmost authority in Ayurveda, Charak. And I'm just repeating what I heard from the authorities. So this initiative also has some aspect of helping us spiritually, emotionally, and physically. So, I'll stop there. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Sorry.
Hare Krishna. Nice to be here in Zagreb. I'm very impressed how many devotees speak English. Quite impressive. I've never been here. It's a very beautiful temple with such lovely deities. Very extraordinary view. And, it's very commendable. I'm sure have such a nice community and facility to serve the community of devotees. Well, I was asked to speak somewhat about how the counselor system has been implemented in the Hungarian yatra, which is just next door. And perhaps just if we see our Vaishnava community in its greater perspective, or at least I try to see it in that way. In due course of time, no doubt, the Krishna conscious movement will define, or even actually in our constitution we're defining, who is a member of ISKCON. Traditionally, a member of ISKCON was someone who lived inside the temple. Now we know that the majority of devotees don't live in the temple, don't engage full-time in the temple. And so what we really have starts to resemble more a Varnashram community, a Varnashram picture of life, where those devotees who follow Srila Prabhupada's teachings, and they may be committed to different degrees, but certainly want to spread Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's mission and serve it in different ways, that they form actually the real community of Vaishnavas. And ultimately the temple or the temples become their place of worship. So in other words, the temple is a part of the community. And it obviously plays a very important role. One is that this is where we come to worship our worshipful deities, although Vaishnavas may have deities in their home, many devotees do. Well, interestingly, I was just reading a letter Srila Prabhupada was writing that when he wrote to a devotee that it's not necessary to have Gaurnitai in your home. He says only those devotees need deities who live far away from the temples. Devotees who live near the temple, they should worship the deity at the temple. Of course, Prabhupada also said other things, but that's one thing also one can keep in mind. And temple becomes a facility for community activities, community service. It becomes a focal point for certain such services to the Lord. And at the same time, it's a place from which devotees can learn and view higher standards of Krishna consciousness. As Prahladananda Maharaj was already explaining, that devotee care means to actually ensure that we are actually on the path back home, back to Godhead. And we're going back to Godhead. But going back to Godhead doesn't happen by accident, either for full-time devotees, either for devotees who are rendering service in other ways. And we see that who lived here in the temple and did full-time service at some time. Can you raise your hands?
Some.
Some. The association that generally we find, which is the integral aspect for advancing in Krishna consciousness, which Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says sadhu sangha. Sadhu Sangha, Nama Kirtan, Bhagavata Shravana, although there are many aspects that are very important for advancing in Krishna consciousness, they need to take place within the framework of Sadhu Sangha. And although chanting Hare Krishna is the most important thing, but chanting Hare Krishna alone is not easy. It's difficult. But it becomes very easy when one does it in the association of others. So Sadhu Sangha becomes the key aspect of advancing in Krishna consciousness. Accepting a spiritual master is Sadhu Sangha, associating with Vaishnavas is Sadhu Sangha, Yagyai Sankirtana prayer, Sankirtana. Sankirtana means Bahumilita, when many devotees come together to chant Hare Krishna, that's called Sankirtana. And the process of perfection for this age is Sankirtan. It's not Kirtan, it's Sankirtan. That means coming together. Srila Prabhupada wanted that we effect this coming together, and there needs to be a form, a systematic form, and Prabhupada wanted things to be systematic, whereby all devotees can regularly come together to get Sadhu Sangha. And Prabhupada was talking to George Harrison in 1973-74 at Bhaktivedanta Manor. George Harrison started talking about, he says, organized religion is not such a good thing. There's so many problems with organized religion. And he was somebody he just donated this property, which was Prabhupada's, then Prabhupada's European headquarters, and he just gave money to print a Krishna book. And Prabhupada replied, no, we must be very organized. Prabhupada wasn't afraid of contradicting him and telling him, and then he says, no, we must be very organized in order to be successful, to practice and especially to spread the mission of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. In the same way, the association that we get, unless it's organized, it becomes just the opposite. It may well be disorganized, and it doesn't become actually effective. So when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says Sadhu Sangha, then in the context of Srila Prabhupada's organized religion, how is it that we can organize that everyone gets association? Now, we're here together and we're associating, and this is one form of association. But this association doesn't necessarily address issues that individuals have. In a very general sense, a broad sense, certainly when we do kirtan together, when we hear Bhagavatam or Bhagavad Gita, then often we see that some particular question we may have or some issue in our lives gets addressed by an answer. But still, it's not systematic. It's not systematic in the sense that it's left to us to then either answer that question or deal with those issues. Is more required. We see often when devotees do service, even devotees who are engaged full-time in temples. For instance, in Krishna Valley, in Yuvrajadam, where we have about, say, 130 devotees who live on the property, and there's another 100 devotees who live in the village next door, just 2 kilometers away. And a lot of them, at least most of them, are engaged on the farm. They have so many services: cow protection, agriculture, gardening, and daily worship and management, and so many things. And although they're together, isn't it a common complaint that devotees have that I don't feel like I really have friends? Or despite the fact that I'm associating with devotees all the time, so the serving together does not necessarily just satisfy or address all of my emotional, personal, circumstantial needs. Devotees go out on book distributions, the Sankirtan party, then we'd be living in a little Sankirtan van together. but they may end up being strangers, even though they're traveling together for years on end. They're out on the streets here and there, they've got a regimen, they have to chant their rounds, they have to cook. There's something that requires a little more than just doing our service and even necessarily coming to morning program and Sunday program. Something that's geared only for association, which can specifically go in depth into issues and the development of our own Krishna consciousness. So I'd heard about this quite some time ago, that this counselor system, although now it's sort of received different names in different